Both manga and comics have been a huge part of my life, and I feel a sense of attachment and nostalgia for both.
Manga is rapidly growing, and the traditional US comics, North American comics, are shrinking.
I feel like every comic book writer is trying to ram their political agenda down your throat.
But mainstream comics are getting worse day by day.
This is for April 2021. Every one of the top 20 books for American comic book sales are all manga.
Forbes has several articles about comic book sales figures, and the industry has actually seen a 30% growth since 2019. However, the vast majority of this growth is actually in the kids' comics and manga sections. Superhero comics have seen a significant decline in sales, and in contrast, manga sales are up a whopping 41%. Currently, comic books and manga sales are clubbed together in most sales estimates, but there is good reason to believe that manga has higher sales volumes in America than American comic books. This might lead some to conclude that the cultural fascination or the demand towards superhero comics has declined, but that is simply not the case. As you can see in the most recent sales figures released by NPD Bookscans, My Hero Academia is one of the highest grossing graphic novels, and it is heavily inspired by traditional Western superhero comics. Indie superhero comics like Cyberfrog and Berserker are making millions through Kickstarter and Indiegogo campaigns, bypassing the traditional distribution channels where industry contacts might be necessary and creative freedom might be suppressed. So it is safe to assume that there is a massive demand for superhero comics which is not being fulfilled by the likes of Marvel and DC. So what brought the industry to this state? At the core of this issue is the utter disregard some comic book authors seem to have developed for their audience, and a slow push towards a certain political ideology by various companies that are trying to cater to an audience that is more concerned with this ideology than the story within the comic books. Twitter has somehow become the de facto forum for a lot of the discussion surrounding American comics, and an extremely vocal minority of Twitter users seem to steer the conversation to a certain direction. The authors now seem to think the audience that's buying their books is more concerned with what this vocal minority is saying rather than what the actual audience desires. The problem with catering to this minority of Twitter users instead of your audience is that these people do not buy anything. This isn't limited to comic books. They do not watch the TV shows and movies they show support for either. Late night shows try to cater to the same audience, and their ratings are going down rapidly. Batwoman is also a huge fail in terms of viewership. So is A Little Late with Lily Singh. The incompetence of comic book authors has grown to such an extent that even people indifferent to the comic book culture, such as Joe Rogan, are ridiculing the newer comics like Marvel's New Warrior.
But people were mad at this. The people they were trying to pander to were like, I don't dress like this.
You better not. It's ridiculous. If you dress like that, even people that don't want to make fun of you will start making fun of you.
Well, it just looks like I would give up. I'm like, I can't mock you better than you're doing yourself.
Like what? Okay.
I mean, if I was like, hey, why don't you make fun of the stupidest woke comic you could think of? That would be my characters.
Bro, her bulge is bigger than his bulge too. Have you noticed that?
Well, how do you know that's the woman?
Well, I'm assuming the one that's in the blue with the hips like a woman is the woman, and the one that's built like a man, I'm assuming that's a man.
It's a trick question. Neither of them are a woman.
The reason demand for comics hasn't gone down a much sharper decline is due to variant incentives. Variant comics are comics with exclusive comic book covers that a store can only purchase if they buy a certain number of normal first issue comic books. For example, if you want to buy a specific variant comic issue, you must buy 50 standard issue comic books. Quoting an article from sci-fi.com, variant covers have become a crutch to support the financially limping comics industry. Often, stores set aside variant issue comic books and sell them to some customers for a much higher price. This opens up the comic book industry to the same price gouging tactics used in the current mobile games market, where a small number of high-paying customers keep the industry alive by paying a ton of money. In my opinion, the comic book fans are disgusted by the moral posturing and grandstanding done by these authors, as well as the utter disregard shown towards the art itself, and it reflects in the terrible sales figures. Manga is, to an extent, removed from the mainstream American culture as well as critics. Hence, there haven't been any ideologically motivated manga yet written by any popular authors. But this is subject to change with rising investment in anime and manga by American companies like Netflix, Crunchyroll, and Funimation. Some might say that Western culture influencing manga is an outrageous claim, but it is already happening. BoundingIntoComics.com reports Square Enix recently updated the costume for Mom in media related to their upcoming revival of Dragon Quest Adventures of Dai in order to make her appearance less risque. Sony also has a notorious self-admitted censorship policy which has been enforced mainly on Japanese games, as seen in the addition of bright lights over non-sexualized images of the female form in Devil May Cry 5, and in the case of games such as Aokana 4 Rhythms Across the Blue, outright cancellations due to excessive cutting of content. Viz Media recently hired DJ Kirkland, an individual who regularly and vocally advocates for censoring or changing manga according to the Western standards, and has asserted that there is going to be a conversation between stakeholders in Japan and here as in the United States when it comes to creating content that appeals to more Western audience. He described his new position at Viz Media as being close and personal to manga. I have spent a lot of time reading comics like Spider-Man, Archie's, and Tintin while growing up, and I do not wish to see manga go in the same direction as the newer comic books. The best thing we can do to stop this from continuing is to stop financially supporting companies who engage in activities that directly result in the degradation of media. Cool story about this video, someone commented on one of my videos about manga asking my views about Western comic books, which is what partially inspired me to make this video. So if you want me to make videos about something you care about, commenting about it is probably a good idea. If you like the editing for this video, you can contact me through the link in the description to hire me as a video editor. That's it for this video. If you liked it, I hope you subscribe. Thank you for watching and bye.